Near the top of the list of cool tools that I will never ever be able to buy is a fit bike. The ability to easily adjust the contact points and try different riding positions would be pretty cool. This gravel bike project is my first drop bar frame, and I've been feeling a little out of my element on this one, so I really wanted to get onto a fit bike to check the numbers. So a few weeks ago, I went to Angry Catfish's website and scheduled a bike fit. They have a few different options, but I went with the new bike fit. The main goal here wasn't to get a fine-tuned fit or try to fix some sort of fit issue. My goal was to sit and spin on my design before I actually started building the frame, and to get some general advice on the overall fit from Catfish's bike fitter, Steven. I had a pretty good idea that my design was in the ballpark, but I wanted to make sure and see if there were any tweaks I could make to make it better. If you're in the Minneapolis area and looking to get a bike fit, I highly recommend Angry Catfish. I'll put a link to their fit page in the description. In this video, I'll talk about my fit process, how I selected the tubes for the frame, and then I'll label all the tubes for the front triangle. Here's the last design I created prior to the fit appointment. If you look closely at the top, this is version 6, and it didn't stop there. It usually takes me multiple tries to get something I feel good about, with lots of adjusting numbers until I get a balance that feels right for me and the bike. Then I made a version with just the XY fit dimensions so Steven could set up the fit bike. It was pretty cool to be able to experience the fit of my design before even mitering a single tube. After spinning on the initial setup for a while, we agreed on the saddle location, and then Steven started to adjust the reach and height of the handlebars. I was able to try slightly different riding positions within just seconds of each other. He'd move the bars 5 or 10 millimeters, and I'd ride it for a while to see how it felt. Some were more upright, and some were more aggressive. We eventually settled on moving the bars down about 7 millimeters and out about 15. Once I had the new saddle and handlebar XY dimensions, I came home and adjusted my bike head model to get the fit within a millimeter or two. Because of the slightly lower seat height, I shortened the seat tube to 61 centimeters to give myself a little more wiggle room with the dropper. And that was the only change I made to the frame. I moved the handlebars by using a different stem and swapping a 5mm headset spacer. I won't be surprised if the fit gets tweaked again once I actually get some miles on it, but I'm confident the frame sizing is good, and any minor tweaks can be handled by stem and spacer adjustments. Now that I have my final frame design, I can start figuring out what tubes to use. The process of choosing the tubing for a frame takes a little work. Obviously, I can't use tubes that are too short, but because I'm using butted tubes, I also can't use tubes that are way too long and just cut them shorter. For example, BikeHad does a great job of telling me the minimum length I need for a tube, which for my down tube is about 684 millimeters. Now, tubing manufacturers only make butted tubes in certain sizes, and none of them are 684 millimeters. So I have to find a tube that is at least 684, but not so long that I cut the butts too short. Here's a diagram of a butted tube. The wall of the tube is thicker at the ends where it gets welded or brazed, and thinner in the middle where that extra thickness isn't needed. This makes the butted tube lighter and flex differently than a straight gauge tube. The diagram obviously isn't to scale, but it does a good job of showing the cross-section of a butted tube. I listed the wall thicknesses above it and the butt lengths below. Based on my weight and riding style, the type of bike, and the overall look I'm going for, I know I want to use a 34.9mm diameter tube with a 969 wall thickness. So then I have to check the different tubing suppliers for a tube that works. Here's the down tube I'm using. Ideally, I would have been able to find a 700mm tube, but this was my best option. This tube from VeloSpec is quite a bit longer than I need, but the 210mm butted end is big enough where I can cut the tube to length and the butt won't be too short. In this case, I need to cut 56mm off the overall length, which will leave the maximum butt length at the head tube at 154mm. The miter is about 2 centimeters deeper on the bottom of the down tube, but that still leaves me over 130mm of butting. You'll notice this down tube has a 80mm butt at the bottom bracket end, which puts the butt length at about 70mm at the bottom bracket shell and 60mm at the seat tube notch after mitering. I'd prefer it to be a little longer, but it'll work. Then I repeat the process for the top tube and the seat tube. Both of those tubes are closer to full cut length, so I'll end up with butts around 100mm or more at all these joints. This will be my first time using Reynolds tubing, and so far they look great. Nice clean surface and the butts all checked out. This is only the second time I've used a pre-made seat tube. Most of my frames have used a straight gauge tube with either a sleeve brazed on the outside or a seat tube collar brazed onto the end. Because of the forces of the seat post clamp and the nearby attachment of the seat stays and top tube, the seat post end of the seat tube needs to have thicker walls. So here's a list of all the tubes, dropouts, and braze-ons for this project. My plan is to use some old pre-bent chainstays from Nova Cycles, but I haven't laid out the rear end yet, so I'm not sure if they'll work. If they don't, I'll just use one of my yokes and some 3/4 inch straight gauge 4130. And here are all the actual pieces of the puzzle. I like seeing all the parts laid out and thinking about how they'll all come together to make a bike frame. At this point, I'm planning on using Paragon rocker dropouts, mostly so I can easily switch between 135 QR and 142 through axle wheel sets that I already have. The frame will have a 1x drivetrain, a dropper post, a bottle cage in the seat tube, and I'm going to run all 3 cables down along the down tube. After that, the brake and derailleur cables continue down the chainstays. Next, I check and label all the tubes, including the location of the butts. I can look up the butt lengths for all these tubes online, but I like to double check just in case. Once all the tubes are labeled, they're ready to get mitered. In the next video of the series, I'll set up the jig and start cutting some tubes. If you want to see how the rest of the build goes, be sure and hit the like and subscribe buttons so that you'll see the next video when it's published. If you're enjoying this video, consider a super thanks. And if you haven't watched my other videos, go check them out. Thanks for watching, take care, see you next time.